or when the work, if I feel like I'm at a good stopping point, then my anxiety is managed, but I won't sleep if I go home and the work's not done. So it's like it's a toss up on, do I want to be anxious, but I've taken some time for myself, or do I want to get the work done and then just go home and go to sleep? So
Yeah.
but it's like that during the job. And then when it's not, then we're like, oh, it's like I have a prop master friend. He was going to Thailand for his 3 months off, and you have that ability to go off and, do those things. We make good money during the year, and then, you take that time, but a lot of people don't. Like I did 3 years in a row backed, snowballing, rolling into my next show.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had no time. So this strike, I'm actually like very rested.
You might be the only one.
Everyone else is begging for a mayonnaise commercial.
So I'm still staying busy,
No, of course.
What do you know now that you wish you knew 10 years ago?
So for me, maybe it was 10 years ago. So finances were always a big thing for me that I wish I had done. Like I wish I was saving earlier. I wish, like when you move to LA, right, you're living like shoestring budget, like you're on the poverty. Like my first year, I think I made $10,000. And that's like, how do you live on that? Like that's not even rent. So it's like things like, buying shampoo and toilet paper and stuff was really stressful my first couple of years. But knowing what I know now and like where I'd be, like I wish I had saved more money, I guess, as I started making money. Like you go from poverty to all of a sudden you're rich, and so I'm like, yes, I'm rich, but you're not. You're just like, oh, catching up for the years that you didn't make. So for me, I think financially, because it's like that starving artist mentality, and so you make bad decisions because you're like, there are the best of times and the worst of times, and so I definitely wish I had taken a finance class in college or something.
Me too.
I mean, I think that it just doesn't exist for so many people. It just, people don't think about it. It's not taught. It's not
right. Like, why would you go to a quiet
thing?
Advisor? You have no money. What do they have to advise you on?
Well, and you have to, well, even for financial advisors, you have to have a certain amount of money before they'll even talk to you. I actually think it's something in schools that should be taught, and
totally.
It's not home ec or whatever they did in the 60s.
Yeah, I ended up finding like a girl on Instagram that like advises like for cheap, and like just gives you like savings advice and stock. Like nobody taught me how to invest money or to like what the stock market was. Like I'm working in movies. So like you're paid check to check, or you're job to job, and you're 12, 18 hours. When do you have time to do that stuff? Like a lot of people have a hard enough time. Like Sunday, your day off is the day where you do your laundry and you go to the bank. You can't go to the bank. It's a Sunday. Like there's all that stuff that you end up like dealing with. I mean, again, I have.
That's what your 20s are for, I guess.
Right. So 10 years ago, I wish I had learned more about that.
I'm in my late 40s and I'm still going through this. So screw all of you. Okay.
He's in his very, very late 40s, everybody. Much older than me, even though he's got the hair.
And I look 20 years younger than you. So.
Yes.
I hate you, by the way. I hate your guts.
Yeah, we're being way too polite, Liz.
We really are. We are
are
so much worse than this.
We're gonna let you go, but what's last thing for me is just like what's next, and like what's your dream projects?
Good question. So I was telling you guys about the Western. I have this show called American Primeval on Netflix.
Yeah.
We're not done shooting it yet because of the strike. So there's a chance to go back to finish it all up. So that might be my next, what my next gig is if they call us back to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to work on more sci-fis. I would love to work on a fantasy, like a House of the Dragon or The Witcher, or those like world building. Oh, I know you hate that word, Tara, sorry.
Yeah, I just threw up in my mouth.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, the Lord of the Rings. I mean, any of that stuff. It's Star Wars.
Get on the 10-year Harry Potter project on Max.
I would love that.
That's a career.
I mean, obviously, Star Trek shoots up in Canada, but if another Star Trek show would take me, like obviously I have the skill set and like obscure knowledge base for that. So yeah, I mean that type of the volume stuff. I mean, I'm taking volume class, Unreal class, so I'd like to put those skills to use. But the sci-fi is kind of where my sci-fi fantasy is where my heart lies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always like, oh, a Western or a historical drama. I don't like Westerns. I'll do them, but I noticed that that's not for me. So, but like the fun, like medieval stuff, I haven't, my dreams haven't been killed with that yet. So I still need to try that out and see if I like it.
Chainmail and blood and
yeah. Like I would love watching all of that stuff. So any of that, like Outlander, like, cause the sets that for me, it's you get to be really creative, you get to be historical, but it's like you're building beautiful works of art, really. So anything where I can flex those muscles.
Liz, thank you so much for your time. We super appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz. Really, this was great.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Welcome back. And that was such a great interview with Liz. I thought, Trevor, she's great.
Yeah, she's wonderful. She's really good, and I'm happy for her that her career is really taking off.
Yeah, just as soon as the strike is over, hopefully everyone can get back to work. So we're still
there is
in
that
strike land here. Just before we move on from Star Trek Picard, we need our hot topic.
Hot Pockets.
Get that hot topic? Hot pockets, Trevor? You got that?
I'm so bored with you.
You got that? Well,
yeah.
Hot topic today is the music from Star Trek Picard season 3. So, I loved it. Did it resonate with you at all?
Yes, because I felt that there were themes. Correct me if I'm wrong. There were themes brought in from a lot of the classic series. There were also themes and cues brought in from the movies.
I think there were nods to everything. There were nods to the movies, to the shows. Yeah. Quite a bit was brought in, and I just felt big. I mean, the soundtrack for the series, like all the different parts to it, it just felt big and bold to me, which I really appreciated. It was back to cinematic and bold choices.
The music was fantastic, and I struggled with season 3, but I definitely enjoyed the music. That was something that you and I talked about pretty regularly.
There's a track that I love. It's called Legacies. Okay, it's track 18 on the soundtrack. I've got an Apple Music. You can actually go on YouTube.
So wait, there's an actual soundtrack for Picard season 3 that's out?
I don't know why it's on YouTube, the whole album, but it is by Lakeshore Records. You can get an Apple Music. I don't know if it's everything, but there's a lot of tracks there. And track 18 is called Legacies. I'm going to play a little bit of it. It's just 3 minutes and some change long. But you've got, when this episode, right? This episode is happening when they're at the Fleet Museum, and Seven and Jack and Seven's going through all the different ships that are sort of stored there, right? And you've got the Deep Space Nine theme that's like fun and light, and like these are all orchestrated. To me, I think they sound a little different than the originals, and a little bit different tempo, I think. But don't quote me on that. But you got the DS9 theme that transforms into the original Star Trek theme. It's all distant and light and sort of like nice. You got the Next Gen, I think, theme that comes in there. And then what I really appreciate, again, wasn't huge into Voyager, but what I love is that it sort of unfolds into the Voyager theme. And it's the Voyager theme, not in a way that's like soaring and like out on an exploration like it was in the show, but it the way it's presented is more of like a memory. And so at that moment with like the dialogue, it's like Seven, she's like, she misses the Voyager, she misses the crew, she's set up as being lost at the beginning of the season, right? She's not called by her name, she's out of place, she doesn't think she should be there. Even though Janeway and Picard had to kind of push her, to become a captain. She wasn't in Starfleet in the previous seasons. She was a ranger. That was a whole thing. And she's searching for a place to belong, which is her arc, and like where she should be. And I just think it's a beautiful moment as you get that like sadder, more like memory of a theme there, and it's not active. And then you've got this thing where the strings come in, and it's like easygoing, and there's sort of again this play on remembrance. And then we eventually get to that awesome reference to the HMS Bounty, and he goes like, "Is that the one with the whales or something?" Is the line that Jack says, and you get that Star Trek 4 theme, and it goes back to. And for me, it goes back to like I had the CD of something called the Astral Symphony. It was like all the big, bold orchestral scores of the original Star Trek movies that I used to play as a kid all the time. So I really appreciate that they went with the more orchestral and big, bold soundtrack than trying to be quote do the modern thing. And being, non-lyrical or non-melodic and all these things. So I really appreciate that. And then what I loved is in the finale, when Picard goes into that collective, they could have just kept going with that, but then we get this sort of synthetic void sound that just like fills up the space doesn't have a melody there for a bit. And then as Jack is kind of coming out of his collective hide, it sort of ramps up. And then the horns come in, and it's both the music is both like Star Trek. It's old, it's new. there's this driving beat that keeps going, and then you get the moving strings come in. Eventually we get like these falling strings that then fight against this like rising brass. So you've got this conflict again of falling strings, rising brass, and then these sort of walking strings that happen, and it goes forward until eventually it just peters out. And I just really sort of like, I think the mix of that sound, old and new, again mixed with the storyline, old and new, I think it all came together really well, and that's why you're wrong and I'm correct in all of this. No, mic drop.
Music was good though.
And I gotta say, and just one last thing, just a little tidbit, but I 100% know this is probably one of the things you hated that you didn't mention, is that when I was in the IMAX screening and we were on the second episode, and Walter Koenig's voice came in as Chekhov's son.
This is President Anton Chekhov of the United Federation of Planets, broadcasting on all emergency.
I yelled at my TV.
Everyone just gasped like, "Oh my god!" And it was familiar and a callback and new and unknown, right? It was a callback to the opening, in Star Trek 4 when the president says "Stay away from Earth," and yes, it was fan service, but you did not know what was.
It was cheap fan service.
I know, it was delightful because you didn't know how that show was going to end at any point. You didn't know how that story was going to end ever. And I kept.
That's true, but I also didn't care.
Well, let's start with you not caring, because you clearly don't care about anything. But like. The not knowing how a story ends, it seems silly.
Yes.
But this goes back to my point about prequels. When you know when the story is going to ultimately end, it makes anything that happened earlier or going back in time. Here, we did not know how the story was going to end.
Yeah.
And that, it shouldn't be special,
that makes it very
but that
exciting.
makes it special.
Right. That so I'm going to bring up a recent example that's not sci-fi at all.
So we'll cut this part out, everyone.
Just to say, no, you're absolutely right in that regard. I honestly did not know at all how Succession was going to end. Every time I thought I had a grasp on how that might end, it went another way. All the way up until the very end, I was blown away by that ending. So you're right.
I haven't seen it yet. So does it have aliens? Artificial intelligence? No.
I'm just saying, I agree with you. Not knowing,
sort of like Game of Thrones, but I'm not saying how it was. I'm not saying how it was implemented. I'm saying no one knew how it was going to end. Right, and that made it.
No, I think we all, anybody with half a brain.
I think people don't. Because people were upset. Just to go on Game of Thrones for a second, people were upset that like she was like killed at the end and she kind of like turned evil. But if you go back, like I did a rewatch because I was confused by the end of it a little bit. I was like, wow, people really hate it. Let me watch it again. I was okay with it. She constantly saying, if those people don't listen to me, I will burn their houses down and kill all of them. Yeah. So it would completely track the whole time. But. Yeah. Right.
Well, here's the thing. Though the two showrunners on that show, I've never been a big fan of theirs, and I don't think they're very compelling. And
they lost their Star Wars gig. I think
they lost their Star Wars, and I think the reason they were able to get by was because they had such rich source material to work from, and then when the source material went away, they revealed who they really were, and everything seemed projected from a mile away.
But kudos to them for they dove into those books and they knew it inside and out, because I think Martin did not believe that they could handle the material and knew it, and he quizzed them and they knew it, and they figured things out, and so
and there is an art to adaptations, and they did a great job. But when it came to when they had to write original material, they've been bad about it in the past,
but they had a rush.
Very bad about it.
They were so rushed to it. It was I mean, speaking of world building, they made a very large, expansive world seem really small, very quickly.
Yeah, it was very disappointing.
All right, Trevor, that looks like that's all the time we have. It's almost been a pleasure sitting here and talking with you. But I can't say
any of it was a pleasure, let me tell you.
But I do appreciate you sitting quietly and letting me interview Liz. So.
Oh, no. You mean talk over me?
Yes.
And pushing me out of the way constantly, and not
you
letting
get
me
your two questions in.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic.
Well, if anyone has any comments or questions or thoughts, feel free to email us at nowinscenariopodcast@gmail.com. That's nowinscenariopodcast@gmail.com, and subscribe and follow us. We are on everything now: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible. I'm sure there's more missing there. iHeartRadio. You could just go to Trevor's house and listen with him. He's got it blasting